I remember seeing these moccasins, right, that my great-grandmother made, and I didn't appreciate them at the time, but then as I got older, started learning more about it. And then as I traveled as a curator, coming across beadwork, particularly, First Nations, and just loving the touch of it, how it's like so tactile, and just loving the feel of it, especially when they're loose and you can like put your fingers in a bag.
I think for a lot of years as a contemporary art curator, I separated that I knew how to bead. I separated this from my contemporary art curation practice, which really speaks, I think, to the time. And I think my auntie, she saw the link. I think that's why she encouraged me to learn and wanted to teach me. She didn't see a gap between curating or studying art history and beading. She saw it all being interrelated. So for me, it took a while for me to see that. I think there's a current that started, all the incredible contemporary beadwork actions and practices right now really was a gentle reminder and encouragement and almost permission for me to fuse what I've done since I was 19 that has culturally grounded me and tied me closer with my family to contemporary curation. So this exhibition just means the world. Like I've been thinking about my auntie and all the aunties who do what she did to move our culture forth, and just in awe of the artists. It's almost like a call and response from the aunties, and these contemporary artists responded with such beauty.
The culture ban that was implemented in the late 19th century, originally focusing on the potlatch and one other Northwest Coast ceremony. But then when the ceremonies were suppressed or indeed outlawed, then everything that went along with the ceremonies was outlawed. So all of the making of regalia. And so then other ceremonies were added to it. So the Sundance was added to it. There was all kinds of ceremonies, and it was legal. It was actually against the law. People could be arrested. And I think most Canadians don't know the extent of cultural suppression under the Indian Act. And that stayed in the Indian Act until 1951. And I remember the late Doreen Jensen telling me that when they heard the law had changed and that they could dance again, that the first thing they did was start making regalia. Because if you're going to dance, you have to have regalia. And even here, I found beading and art making, and it was the late Bob Boyer who pointed this out as well. Very clearly, he'd often point that out, that the creation of beadwork, the creation of outfits, all of the artistic practices around dancing, they used to speak in Saskatchewan of the dancing set. And very negative, like really the dancing set would undo all the good done by residential school. And so they saw these, reclaiming these artistic practices as a real threat to the colonial agenda. So it's really like radical acts of persistence, to dance, to sing, to make the regalia. And I think just being Indigenous in this country is a radical act. And so, practicing culture, speaking language, doing all that, it's acts of radical survival. And the one thing I think that people will see when they're in the show is that there's also radical acts of love.
Yeah. A lot of love.
So much love, intergenerational, mourning, commemoration, celebrating youth, like just all of that. We've got, three cradle boards in the show?
3 cradle boards, yeah.
So, from birth, you're wrapped in beadwork.
The term, I've been thinking lots about beadwork as continuance and, continuum, right? And I think that speaks to the idea of it being radical. Because despite everything that Sherry's saying, despite these acts, despite for Métis, the shame and the attempted forced assimilation and people really just trying to survive a colonial oppression, that this continued, this beauty, this mapping of the land and our kinship ties and speaking to the now and, speaking to the personal, speaking to Indigenous knowledge systems and really beautifully, securing them for oneself in beadwork, that is radical.
Well, and the uniqueness of the practice too, how it can be so personal and meditative, but it's also communal. right? And you can see that, I think, in the artists in the exhibition. There's many artists who've been mentored by some of the more senior artists, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Like it's this multi-generational, intergenerational, intercultural, like, kind of experience.
Judy, Catherine, Ruth, you know, like the networks of artists who teach each other.
Yeah.
Sandra and Jamie Okuma, you know, mother, daughter, peers, teacher, student, like all of that.
Yeah. You know, as we said, hopefully this is one of the last, I don't know, bastions of seeing it as a craft and recognizing, like, nope, this is like a highly skilled art form, and it's just beautiful, right?
This idea that, you know, there was no aesthetic standard. There was always an aspirational standard. There was always known who was the best beader in a community that you would want to emulate, and that often you see that beading excellence in families.
I love how the celestial is presented in a handful of the artists' work.
Oh yeah.
You know, so Nadia Meyer's work that we have in the Sims Gallery, really speaking
of
the
universe.
cause,
It's
the universe.
Yeah.
You know, Hannah Klaus's video, because that's the thing. I mean, it's not all physically beadwork. It's in relation to beadwork, and those works certainly speak to that. Or Margaret Nazon's beautiful beaded painting of the Milky Way and, you know, the stars at night. I mean, it's so incredible. So I think for me that catches my heart quite a bit when I walk in there to see how the celestial is presented. Yeah.
It's translating, like in John Corbett and other works, where it's not actual beadwork, but the inspiration that beadwork has given to so many artists, and that we were able to incorporate that, you know, through Marie Hupfield's work and John Corbett and the video work and the digital bead, right?
Yeah.
Like now this pixel as bead, I know is something that I've been really intrigued by, and to see it being used in a way, like even artists early on, like Buffy St. Marie and her early digital work, you know, like pixel as bead. And
I think what I like too is we have in the exhibition artists who, you know, just thinking of Barry's, is honoring in memoriam. You know, whether it's family members, people close to them or not, or community members, or historical figures, or people who lost their lives in really the worst sort of ways to honor and remember them through beadwork, or through, you know, pixels, or, you know, through computer parts and the, you know, digitally. I think that really is quite lovely to see.
In the materials and the word for the materials, because at least in all the Algonquian languages like Korean, like these are living things. Like the idea that you're working with something that's living, that it's alive. So I don't think flexiform is considered alive, but hide is. Tanned hide is animate. Sinew is animate. The words for beads are either migas or manitomanes, they're living things, and so you're working with living materials on a living surface.
awe and appreciation, and just to fully engage with, like, not just the tactile beauty of it all, but the innovation and the skill and the spirit that's going into these things, right? Like the touch, like, you know, if you think of the touch that's gone into every single bead, and probably by multiple people, and the traveling of these things, and the intercultural, like, nation to nation relations, and you know, crossing the borders that, you know, in spaces we now call Canada and the United States.
Sometimes it seems like the impossible, you know, and certainly I was the hardest student my auntie ever had. I was really not great at it, and continue to struggle today. But it's my hope is this show that people are in awe, but those who maybe have been a little intimidated or nervous to pick up the needle, who maybe are beadworkers and have wanted to do things but felt that they couldn't or shouldn't, that they go in and be inspired to learn, to enhance their practice, and to experiment with beads. That's what I hope for as well.
The hopes of inspiring people, and just respect.
Yeah.
Like respect for the process, respect for the material, and deep respect for these artists.
Yeah.